Harry Litman, welcome back to Mea Culpa. First guest of 2026, so welcome. Couldn't be happier. So much to talk about. Let me jump right into it. I want to start with the biggest departure from U.S. norms, and maybe even the riskiest. When you publicly declare the United States locked and loaded to intervene in Iran if security forces kill peaceful protesters, amid the largest anti-government unrest in years with currency collapse and multiple deaths, are we looking at moral leadership here or a pretext for war without legal authority?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not certain exactly, but if you take the example of Venezuela, he certainly does seem to be a warmonger. And this is the problem across the board. The so-called presumption of regularity, which we think about DOJ, it's out the window. So maybe the assembled brass and all the wise beards of the administration got together and said, you know what we need from you now, Donald Trump? We need you to be bellicose and rattle more sabers and say you're coming in. But it sure doesn't seem to be what you would need now, especially when this, as you say, implacable adversary for almost 50 years looks to be possibly spiraling out of control on its own. So it's very hard for me to think that this is a sound move on his part, and he's thought it through and has the benefit of the wisdom many of the people in the international community within the government, many of whom he has purged. So, you know, like everything else with him, it makes me damn nervous.
Yeah, and rightfully so, because Trump, throughout his campaigning, throughout this almost end of his first year, Trump casts himself as the peace president.
Right.
So how did we arrive at threats of military force without any clear strategy or congressional authorization? I mean, why are we treating crude social media bravado as doctrine?
So true. And threats, it's more than threats. We friggin' bombed Venezuela, not so different from Pearl Harbor and, December 7th, 1941. So how did we arrive there? I think you and I know it's the answer to so many questions, the absolute irresponsibility and megalomania, if I can use a big word that you knew well before I did, but I'm dealing with Donald Trump, of the president of the United States. He's just any scent, especially when things are going bad domestically, any scent of dominance and, bully boy kind of swagger, you just have to imagine he grabs that. And again, the policy and strategic importance of Iran's going down on its own kind of can't be overstated. So if what he's doing makes the regime just hang in more or doesn't exploit possibilities of like back channel negotiations to give them a face-saving way out, he's really harming U.S. interests. We've been, really played by those guys for years and years, and they're still very dangerous. So, as with everything else, it could very well be that our kind of national interests are just being subordinated to not even his personal interests, but just his sort of desire to be tough on the world stage where he's already endured a lot of humiliations.
Yeah, but let's be clear. Iran and Venezuela are two very, very different countries, right? I mean, Iran already took a strike by Trump where he made the allegation that their entire nuclear program has been obliterated, right? So instead of turning around and saying, we struck Iran, we put their nuclear capabilities at least back a dozen years, we would all applaud that. But instead, that wasn't enough. It has to be completely obliterated. But yet, just days ago, while Netanyahu was dining at Mar-a-Lago for the 5th time here in America in a period of 1 year, right? What ends up happening? He talks about another strike to Iran. Strike is to assist or allow Israel to go ahead and to finish the job. But again, curious, as they say, curiouser and curiouser, I thought that we obliterated. So what are you telling me, that Iran was successful in building nuclear fusion facilities in a period of what, 3, 4, 5 months, when even the United States, without having any attacks on them at all or any restrictions, could actually, it would take us what, 5 years to build that facility at minimum?
And notwithstanding that you looked the people in the eye, as it were, and said, we got everything. And then it turned out to be one more sort of Trump posturing. So, yes, I just want to say, this is not in either your or my strike zones. The people who it is in the strike zones of serve a super important purpose in the country. Many of them have been purged. Other of them, they're looking to make criminal defendants in some way, which scares the people who are still there. So, I mean, this is some serious stuff for him to be doing his third grade schoolyard bully kind of act. And at a minimum, it strikes me that he is likely really squandering an important foreign policy opportunity with people who have been a country that's been a, burr on our saddle, or however you want to put it, for almost 50 years. So do you have confidence? Do I have confidence that he somehow stumbled into the right thing? I would say not at all. Zero. And it's a damn shame.
Yeah, and I have even less confidence in Pete Hegseth. Now, speaking of, right?
Don't get me started.
No, okay, I won't. Because speaking of accountability, I have to ask this question, but I have to ask it in my Michael way. Where the fuck is Congress in all of this? I mean, if the Constitution gives Congress the war power, yet all we hear are tweets and posts and threats, what does it tell us about institutional failure coming up in 2026?
And this is not a small, if anything, a small institutional failure, like not standing up for certain employees, et cetera. This is, along with the, taxing and revenue raising power, what Congress does, what the framers first actually conceptualized from a world in which, remember, you had kings just doing these adventures to bring glory to themselves, bankrupt the countries, often completely bring on, terrible ravaging events. The framers were like, we don't want any more of that. There must be the voice of the people before we go to war. Now, it's true, donning my legal nerd hat, that the what seems like an ironclad power in the Constitution to declare war has really been watered down since World War II, and there's all kinds of things that feel like war to us that the president has undertaken, although, so I'm talking, Korea and Vietnam and everything after 9/11, but there were, I think in all instances, yes, Gulf of Tonkin, Korea, and the authorization to use military force, a thumbs up from Congress. Even a weaker Congress said, okay. And here they have done nothing of the sort. And to stay on the nerd highway just a little bit longer, a very famous opinion by Justice and former Attorney General Robert Jackson says, in that situation, if Congress had given it sort of thumbs up, just with an authorization to use military force, even though it's not war, the administration's hand would be quite strengthened. But when it hasn't, or arguably even, because it shied away from it in Venezuela, has expressed its disapprobation, the executive power is at its so-called lowest ebb. Does Trump give a farthing about that? I don't think so. No. Is there anybody to actually sue and have standing? I don't think so. And it's really, as you say, this political, not just problem, but debacle that Congress, in its most important role, arguably, for the nation and the nation's security, is, as with every other thing, just out to lunch, AWOL. But the answer to your profane and justifiably profane question is, who the fuck knows? But it's the same place they've been since January 20th, 2025.
Harry, how you know that everything here is upside down, inside out, and backwards? When you have Iran's government calling Trump's warning, his posts, his social media, his comments, a blatant violation of international law. I mean, that's just, to me, comical. That Iran,
it's so true. But we just don't know, in so many ways, he's totally altering the DNA of who the United States is in the world, whom they support, whom we stand for. So just leaving aside all the, moral aspect and strategic aspect, who the hell knows when he says stuff like this, giving Iran the opportunity, the opening to say, see, the real outlaws are over there in the Atlantic Ocean. What that does with the rest of the Arab world, does it somehow bring others to the regime in Iran's support? What's the actual kind of fine-grained possibilities of getting people? You have a very old maximum leader, et cetera, et cetera. None of this, he knows it as well as he knows the Constitution. I always think of this image from Scaramucci that he started to read it to him, and after two sentences, Trump just tuned him out. He's boasts that he is a leader who just goes on reflexes, et cetera. That's just not how you play it, where huge foreign policy and strategic implications of the country are absolutely on the line. It's exactly.
It's asinine. Yeah. But what makes it so ridiculous is to give the Iranian government the opportunity to turn around and to validate statements that they make to their people, right? Yes. Which is that U.S. interference, the intent is to destabilize the region. It always has. They're against us. They're against our traditions, our Sharia law, and so on. And that this has always been their way, which justifies the actions that they have taken in the past and that they probably intend to take going forward. And that, to me, is the dangerous aspect of this sort of texting tough guy routine. So
yeah, haven't we learned 26 ways since 1979 and before? This is a tricky part of the world, and playing it smart involves knowledge, sophistication, steadfast adherence to the U.S. interests and what we're doing there. He's got exactly zero of it. And if there's anyone left who still does, he's obviously happily booting them to the sidewalk. So again, this is not primary school stuff. This, his mistake, even lost opportunities here have ongoing consequences for a generation or two in terms of the world we live in and the U.S.'s role in it. And he, basically, as best we can tell, is screwing up everything and preparing to erect a triumphal arch with a big T in it. It's a joke, except it's not a very funny one.
Right. So, Harry, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
And this, of course, sounds like a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, right? Is deterrence by social media or truth social posts counterproductive or dangerously unmoored from reality? And why is nobody stopping it?
Well, how would you stop it exactly? He's got First Amendment rights himself. It's certainly true. You'll wake up. What's new? Somehow the madman at 4 a.m. has done, as if he sent out the bombs, done a whole new social media, usually full of scurrilous falsehoods. But then besides that, assuming a totally crazy posture vis-a-vis the law, the Constitution, etc. You can't stop it. in a way you almost don't want to. You want to hear what he's got. You would know better than I, but he's got this oddly uncensored side where he just bloviates over his social media and it comes out. But why can he do it? Because same reason you and I can do it, unless they, come after us.
There's a big difference. So when you and I do it, we're talking to our community. I don't care how big the community is. He's talking to the world, and he's not talking to the world and the constituents, right, of each country. He's talking to the leaders of the country, based upon his comments, they take affirmative or defensive postures.
100%.
So this is a real problem. So
I'll just say quickly, it's asinine, as you put it, not unconstitutional, but surely asinine. He's got no discipline at all. Sorry, go ahead.
So that's okay. Let's talk about Venezuela again.
Okay.
A place where conflict is also not a hypothetical. Right. So Trump has confirmed that he called American military action against narco networks and alleged drug vessels in Venezuelan waters, right? I mean, literally blowing them up. I don't even know how many we're up to now. Maybe 25, 26, 27.
Yeah, that's about right. Certainly over 100 killings.
Yeah, over 100 dead. Even as Caracas expresses openness to talks. What's going on over there? I think it's pretty
clear. Again, a little out of our strike zones, but he's trying to make war. But you're not supposed to aggress and make war. That's against international law. And he's trying for regime change with Maduro, who, by all accounts, people we respect. That wouldn't be a bad thing for the world, but that doesn't mean you can just go in as like the CIA apparently did in the 70s in some places in South America. Let me just talk about the legal implications, Michael, because we have what we were told was a operation not against Venezuela, not against Maduro, but against these narco terrorists, Tren de Aragua, who somehow these fisher boats were working for. And the idea was, and it had to be in order to justify the flagrant, just dropping of bombs, that they were somehow what looks to the world, at least, as equally plausible guys selling drugs, a law enforcement problem. No, this turns out to be the making of war because they used the money from the drugs to politically undermine the U.S. It all seems kind of fanciful, and by the way, I think wouldn't cut the mustard legally anyway, for among other reasons, because Congress has not weighed in as it had in other non-international armed conflicts, that is, conflicts against groups. But it turns out, I think, that was always a lie. As we learn more and more, it was like, Stephen Miller's great idea was to do this to Mexico, but Mexico actually changed its conduct in a way that made it not feasible. So just when they were like, I know, let's get that Maduro guy. And, the lawfulness of using deadly force on ragtag fishermen off the coast of the Caribbean has everything to do with the reasoning. That OLC memo that we haven't seen, I guarantee you, has all this stuff about how they are making war on us through their, which it was first fentanyl, remember? Then it was cocaine. Now and it was always Tren de Aragua. Now it's really regime change, and that testimony or leaking from within the administration is very strong. You just can't do this willy-nilly and maintain the same already tenuous legal justification. So even when it came time for that second strike and Bradley, stepped up and embraced it, It was because he had been told that there's the equivalent of basically, howitzers or nuclear weapons, the cocaine itself. And so he was determining, is there cocaine there? And it can, because we've been told that Tren Aragua is using it to make war on us. Now, it's not that. It's not Tren de Aragua. It's Maduro. And we are just, I think, lawless infidels. And the OLC memo gives no cover at all to the people who are doing this. So you can't just, if you're going to lie and change your story repeatedly, as these guys always do, it has real implications for the legal justification under the law of war of what you're doing. We're going to look very possibly like just international outlaws, and leaving aside, well, you know, the possible consequences for officials, etc. When that happens, it totally weakens our ability to actually push in the world, including with adversaries like China, like Russia, for a sort of American way, morals driven and the like. So the same, you lie about it, and it's not just like the lie about how the economy is doing or whatever. It can really hurt the national interests of the American people on the ground.
You know, I spent a lot of my life running at full throttle. Law, politics, this media, and somewhere along the line, my body started reminding me it has limits. Waking up stiff, feeling sluggish, struggling to recover after a workout. I thought, is this just middle age finally sneaking up on me? Introducing Qualia Senolytic. It's the first of its kind formula designed to help your body naturally eliminate senescent cells. Now, here's the thing. These zombie cells, they aren't just a funny name. They linger long after they've done their job, draining your energy, slowing recovery, and making you feel older than you actually are. Qualia Senolytic is a groundbreaking, clinically tested supplement with 9 vegan, plant-derived compounds that help your body naturally clear out those zombie cells. You take it just 2 days a month, and it supports better cellular health, so you can feel more energized, recover faster, and tackle your days, well, like you used to. For me, it's been a total game changer. I feel sharper, more energetic, less sore after workouts, and honestly, I do feel years younger. It's like I got a little of my old self back, ready to take on life without the drag. So experience the science of feeling younger. Go to qualialife.com/Cohen for up to 50% off your purchase and use code Cohen for an additional 15%. That's Qualia Life, QualiaLife.com/Cohen. Your older self will thank you, and thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode. You know, I've left doctor's appointments before feeling like, I got nothing useful out of it. You're fine, Michael, or drink more water, but no real data, no actionable plan, nothing that tells me to actually improve my health or how. That's exactly why I'm so excited about Superpower. They do things differently. A licensed professional can come to your home, or you can visit a nearby lab and get one simple draw with over 100 biomarkers. I mean, that's way more than your standard checkup. It gives you a real understanding of your body as you head into the new year. I mean, through the app, you get detailed insights on your heart, your liver, your thyroid, hormones, metabolism, vitamins and minerals, and even environmental toxins. From disease prevention to fixing brain fog or even optimizing your workouts, Superpower, it gives you the most comprehensive advanced system out there. And the best part, you get an actionable health plan based on your results. Supplement suggestions, nutritional guidance, lifestyle adjustments. You no longer have to guess. You even get your true biological age, and you can track it over time. Every single test builds on the last, so you see progress year after year. Their on-demand clinician team, it's also there to answer questions anytime. There's no waiting. There's no Google searches. Superpower used to, by the way, cost $499. But right now, the full experience, it's just $199. So make this year that you stop guessing about your health with Superpower. Not only did Superpower reduce their price to $199, but for a limited time, our listeners right here, you get an additional $20 off by using code Cohen. So head right now to superpower.com and use code Cohen at checkout for an additional $20 off your membership. And after you sign up, they'll ask you how you heard about them. So make sure to mention this podcast to support the show. I honestly love how Superpower helps you proactively understand and improve your health. So if you want to live longer, better, and healthier, and finally stop guessing about what your body needs, this is the most complete system I've ever seen. So again, that's superpower.com, superpower.com, and use code Cohen at checkout. Go now. I mean, their justification is so stupid. It's so stupid. It started out, as you said, with fentanyl, then it moved to cocaine, and then marijuana, despite the fact that marijuana is now, legal in the country. But what makes the justification so stupid, the way that they'll turn around next and say they were fishing when it's shown by documentation that they were fishermen that got blown up, or at least some of them were. Well, they were stealing the fish that were on their way to America, meaning that they were depriving Americans of the ability to get cheap fish. They were supposed to get cheap fish coming in, and they were stealing it.
This means war. So you take our fish, we're gonna fuck you. Yeah, it's amazing.
We blew them up. We sent them to hell where they belong. But as stupid as that is you got the Pentagon here, and the silence from the Pentagon with, these mixed reports that are coming out, that sort of stupid, slow drip from somewhere, raise very serious questions.
Well, it does, but I'm always looking, because you and I distressingly agree all the time these days, always looking for a little daylight between us. The Pentagon, yes, he has purged so many of the best people, but they have a culture. And you saw it with the resignation of the, guy right under Bradley, who said, I don't think this is legal. They're honorable. And when they have issues of disagreement, they air them privately, or sometimes they'll resign. So I think it's quite possible that they're nevertheless speaking up the way a Pentagon traditionally does. People, I think, don't give the whole military system, including the court-martial system, the credit it deserves. On the other hand, of course, any president with sense, forget about, morals, just sense, hearing something from a 30-year general about what might be going on would immediately be nervous and taken aback, think about it twice. Not this guy, right? He's just let's fire him and bring in another general to tell me what I want. Yeah.
Yeah, because Harry, if this really was about drugs, then why does it seem, at least it does to me, like undeclared conflict by memo and by post, by social media post, as opposed to strategy and oversight, whether it's by Congress, by the by the Department of War, by the secretaries and so on. It's not. The entire conflict starts with a post, gets picked up by media, and then all of a sudden that becomes almost like existing policy.
Yeah, you are so right. Look, if this were about drugs, how do you deal with drugs? Look at the former president, is it Honduras, whom Trump just pardoned. That guy is bringing hundreds of tons of drugs into the country. So what do? You extradite him according to the law. You put him on trial. You give him all constitutional rights and protections, and you put him in jail for 45 years, and then Trump lets him out. But that's, that's what you do. Where you don't, even if these were as serious drug lords as we've said, you don't go and blow them away without due process. That is a law enforcement problem, not a national war with, as happened in
well, it is if you don't get enough new subscribers to Truth Social as a direct result of it. It's like, go to Truth Social for all my posts on today's war, right? And who we're going after next. But I wanted I want to switch to a different topic for a second because maybe we'll have a little disagreement in this one, right?
Okay.
Because, I want to talk about, for example, coming out of this administration, punishment, as policy, which is something that we're watching this administration and the president actually do with, for example, Minnesota, federal funds, Carolina. You see, back home here, this administration literally just froze all federal child care funding to Minnesota. And they did it because they're citing fraud, waste, and abuse schemes. Literally, that started with, as we were just talking, a viral video, a social media viral video. Now, officials say that they will release money, but only if states are somehow capable of proving that the federal funds were spent legitimately, a requirement that's now nationwide. Explain this to me.
Yeah, I will, and I'm sorry to say, Michael, you won't get any disagreement from me on this
Damn
one.
it.
There's a we'll keep looking. We had sort of half of one today. That's not bad that's sort of par for the course these days. Look, there's a couple things going on here. So often, what they're now trying to call us fraud, they're doing this literally in the area of fraud against the government, which is where I work legally. But they're saying, what's the fraud? Oh, well, you're still having some kind of DEI policies, etc. So it's the same way of trying to use whatever, somebody's in there, this Stephen Miller or acolyte saying, what can we do for immigration and DEI? And they come up with this. But this is not only a First Amendment problem, it's a 10th Amendment problem. And let me redon my nerd hat. There are several things he's doing that are, including in the election setting, that just completely ignore and derogate state local authority. It's the state's job to decide how to, and there is the Supreme Court has been strong on this principle. We'll see what happens if it's Donald Trump versus that thing, but he's doing it in different states wherever he can, and just basically saying, if you won't do what we say. You have the same thing with Pam Bondi trying to sue states or municipalities, saying you are interfering with federal authority, when really what's happening, this is in Illinois, among other places, is they're not helping, as the Constitution, really reinforced by the Supreme Court, says they don't have to do. So there is a big showdown, or two or three or four, coming, not only on what he's generally doing to derogate the Constitution and trying to interfere with First Amendment rights, but the whole kind of federal versus states. And I'm always thinking about, as best I can, the elections. And there's so many ways in which the states are sovereign. They decide how to hold elections, what to do, et cetera. And they're coming in and trying to slap them around in a way that I think is going to create, landmark legal rulings that you got to pray go the right way.
I enjoy watching, to be honest with you, this administration turn around and try to take the moral high ground, right? This is all predicated on fraud, waste, and abuse, and so on. Rick Scott, I believe, had the single largest fraud in the state of Florida. Trump just recently pardoned another Medicaid fraudster who wasn't as big as Rick Scott, who became governor and is now part of this Trump team. But there was another one who had like a $1.2 billion fraud. Trump pardoned him when he was only like 5-6 months already into his sentence. And that's just to name a few. It's just to name a few. And when they say, that blatant fraud, right? Here's the problem and why it's so obvious. And it's such I like to say, that this is a well thought out, intelligent question. And so it's so rhetorical in its nature, because this allegation wasn't even investigated before the freeze. It's not like there was an FBI investigation or a USAO investigation into the fraud and so on. public outrage as a result of the social media drive is what actually started this, whereby even Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who, as we all know, Trump despises, made the claim that Trump is politicizing the issue to defund programs before any accountability even takes root. He's not wrong.
Yeah, it's so true. Look, and they're using, I work in this area, as I said. It's a pretty complicated area when the Department of Justice will partner with private people to bring cases against fraudsters and the like. I feel very confident that whatever high up official green lighted this idea with the False Claims Act doesn't even know what the False Claims Act is. Somebody went over that, we got this idea, or Steve Miller got this idea, or so-and-so got this idea. You can use this body of law to try to enforce your DEI ideas, or, whatever it may be. Sounds good. Let's do it. No one's thought it through legally. And indeed, the people who, and this is a common theme, but we know about this, you and I, and I in particular in the DOJ, the people who do know about this have gotten totally sidelined in the administration. Yeah. Nobody cares about law, etc. So yeah, the hypocrisy of saying we're going after fraud, by which they mean you're not completely sucking up to us and playing ball in what we want to call DEI stuff, is farcical. But that's where we live now.
Yeah. You know what scares me, Harry?
A lot of things I'm thinking.
Well, yeah, spiders. No, Trump's rhetoric, right? It's really the rhetoric that scares me most. I'm 100% in line with the statement that Trump began with, which is we must stop the massive fraud, waste, and abuse. I'm 100%, and I think every one of my listeners would say, yes, we must stop fraud, waste, and abuse. Okay. Yes, we must also
that, right? Yeah.
We must also stop, for example, having people just decide who wants to come in, who doesn't, to shore up our borders, to have proper immigration. Yeah. Absolutely. We also want to turn around, blah, 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 right? And I'm with him 100%. But where he loses me, where he loses this audience, where he loses the great Harry Litman, is that rhetoric targets specific individuals instead of coming up with a way how to stop the fraud, waste, and abuse, which, by the way, compared to the budget is minuscule anyway. It's a rounding error. But what does he do? He, for example, targets Minnesotans, right? He targets Somali American communities. Yeah. He targets Representative Ilhan Omar. And I don't like Ilhan Omar for many different reasons, right? Some things I agree with, but there are many things that I don't like her. I get it. But he attacks them by name and associating them in these attacks to these fraud claims. And the problem is that this language, which everybody, all critics call incendiary and divisive, they never really get to the root of what he's trying to portray, but rather it just becomes personal instead, and it loses the effectiveness, which, by the way, is good for Democrats, but it's terrible for the country.
It's so true. And look, you've known this better and longer than anyone else, Michael, which is why so many people, and they're growing all the time, tune into Mea Culpa. But his mindset to me is just about individual domination. I will crush you. I remember the 2015, there, 8 candidates. I was I can't believe it, but kind of for Trump because I thought he'd be so easy to defeat. Of course, that's so many of us were wrong in so many ways. But what did he do? He took them out one at a time, whatever epithet he had for each. It's not by virtue of grand policy or here's why I'm some positive argument about here's why I'm different American people and you can elect me. And that's what I think he's done in business, single out individual people and, screw them. That's, I think, what he loves to do, and why he's such an erratic and bad president. He'll announce this big policy and then give individual exemptions to buddies or whatever. Because why? That is maximum power for him on an interpersonal level. But it's disaster on a policy level, because it means that everything turns on the caprice and how many hamburgers he had last night for dinner, and there's no reliability or consistency. But to me, that dynamic, I don't think he understands at all anything about policy or leadership or where he wants to take the country. What he understands, and you would know this better, but as a business person and as a president, is how can you fuck individual antagonists, even create them and then fuck them. That is his whole MO. And besides being, incredibly nasty, cruel-hearted, and get you kicked out of kindergarten, it's just really, really bad policy for the interests of the American people.
But you see, Minnesota's not the only state that seems to have pissed off Trump. Many states have. But
is it state, or is it Tim Walz? Is it
Tim Walz? But we don't know. So, for example,
people, I think. But go ahead.
Sure, you have Colorado. You have Lauren Boebert, right? Because even Lauren Boebert, once a staunch Trump ally, is now literally on the warpath against Trump. And why? Well, because there's a bill that she sponsored that went through the bipartisan unanimous consent that Trump literally vetoed. It's called the Arkansas Valley Conduit Funding Bill. Again, unanimously passed, bipartisan measure that would have supplied clean drinking water to 50,000 Coloradans, many, if not all, in her district, her constituents. And out of nowhere, the President of the United States takes a bipartisan unanimous bill and vetoes it. Why?
Yeah. And my answer to that would be, let's ask Michael Cohen, because it's in the dark psyche of Donald Trump, a place where I have long since pledged not to enter, like the worst horror house in a Halloween amusement park. But I think it's got to do with my standing assumption: individual domination, especially of former allies. We saw this in the Epstein situation. We saw it with Marjorie Taylor Greene. He's just got no, I will crush you. That seems to be not just his governing philosophy, his life philosophy. And again, I don't psychoanalyze because it's just, among other things, boring. But that strikes me as the life philosophy of someone with really deep psychological problems.
Well, Harry, let me turn around, and as I know you're going to be on, whether it's your Substack or television or many other people's podcasts and Substacks and so on, here's the term that needs to from now on be used.
Okay.
It's called political retribution. Because that's technically what it was. He's angry at Marjorie Taylor Greene. The threats of the primaries against them, the attacks calling her a traitor, putting her family in jeopardy. And then you have Lauren Boebert. Probably he would like to take her to one of these theaters or something and sit next to her. Who knows what's going on over there. But this is political retribution, right? Through and through. He's angry at her.
Yeah.
Fuck you. I'm going to turn around and make others suffer so that they hate you too. You see, I would have turned around and I would have, signed off on the Arkansas Valley Conduit Funding Bill, but for your actions. Coloradans, you need to hate Lauren Boebert as much as I hate her today. Again, political retribution. All right. That's just how
Liz Cheney, right? Who he actually ruins, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's literally part of the revenge tour that he said that he intends to follow. The only difference,
I'll just add, I mean,
is this is not that was supposed to be against Democrats, not against Republicans, especially ones who fought so hard for him.
Democrat, Republican, he didn't give a shit. It's just, I will rule. But it seems to me that this is going to get especially tricky as he naturally feels his power ebbing. As new people jockey for the nomination, he's going to want to be, even assuming, and I think it looks more and more the case, Michael, I don't know if you do, that he's not going to try to totally buck the Constitution. He'll still want to be the kingmaker, the most powerful person in the party and the country, and he'll try to position himself for that, so he can still, and what does that mean for him? As we've been saying, he can still screw people even out of office, be the guy, which he did a pretty effective rendition of in the Biden years, right?
So I want to finish by talking to you about something that I think is extremely important, right? And I refer to it kind of as like the day-to-day cost of secrecy. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. I said, this to me is really problematic, this lack of transparency. And I want to talk about, as an example, Trump's bruised hand. All right. I mean, it is a big topic. And so not because he has a bruise on his hand, not because he covers it with the Band-Aids, not because of, any of that, because he is the president. And by the way, the GOP did the exact same thing to Biden when he was not, let's just say, looking well. There is absolutely no official medical disclosure. You get the medical disclosure from Caroline Machine Gun Lips Levitt, who turns around and will tell you everything is perfect. He's the healthiest president in the history of America.
The country.
Right. Yeah. No, that he just passed his third cognitive test. It's not how it's even given. By the way, on one of my Substacks and on Political Beatdown with Ben Meiselas, I turned around and I said, you guys have it all wrong. All right. I was listening to how he was describing the exam. I said, that was not an MRI he went for. I said it was a CT scan. Now, not because I'm a doctor or a genius or I have access to his medical records. I do not. But I've gone for CT scans. I've gone for MRIs. I know what it sounds like. I know the process. So all I did is just deduce that the way he described it is not an MRI. It's a CAT scan, right? Yeah. MRIs don't take 8-10 minutes, right? I just went for a CT scan. The whole thing, it took me longer to get one way to NYU Hospital than it did in order for the entire exam. But I bring this up, again, the bruised hand, being that there's no official disclosure, just these vague explanations, aspirin maybe, and a press that doesn't demand more. Why do we treat presidential health transparency with kid gloves? Why is it not mandatory?
Yes, so that's a really good point. I think in the past it's never needed to be, because presidents understood that their health is an issue of national interest, and they would go and have checkups, and doctors would come out and tell the truth. And we had, as you know, what was his name? Jackson. I think he had an MD, but I'm not even sure. Who in the first literally said, just stop and think about this for a second. The most healthy president who's ever lived. I guess they somehow got the records of Millard Fillmore and John Quincy Adams. It's never been a possibility before that people would be hiding it from us, or B, even that they would be deceiving. And it matters. We talked about Iran. We talked about many things where, sorry, Donald, it's not just about you here. And we've he's got, on the one hand, strong longevity genes. On the other, he lives so unhealthfully and he lies all the time. The American people have a right to know, and they just don't.
So I jump in only because this is a comment that I intend to share with others as well. But as I watched the news reporting on the bruised hand and the conversation about the aspirin intake, 325 milligrams that he, says that he takes every single day, I watched his doctors start talking about this, saying he's self-medicating. Nobody does this.
Yeah.
That wouldn't cause the bruising on the hand. Blah blah blah. And they all. It's like if I said to you, Harry, what's the answer to the math problem? And you said to me, what math problem? Just give me the answer. I don't know, 18. I'm like, no, it's 4. You're like, well, how the fuck am I supposed to know? I haven't looked at. They don't know, and I find it disdain. I have like disdain for these folks that want to get themselves on television for whatever the reason. Maybe they just get a kick out of it, and they're willing to say things. I want to be crystal clear about something, and I know this not by hearsay. I physically
you were there,
watched it for over a decade. Trump takes 325 milligrams of aspirin every single day. I have watched him every single day when I would sit with him in his office. It's bare aspirin is what he takes, 325 milligrams. I'll tell you exactly where that bottle is located in his office, in his left side drawer, right to the left of him, as he's sitting there, closest to the window, top drawer. And I'll bet you $1 billion to 1 that he's got a bottle of that same bare aspirin, the large 100 tablets, not the good stuff too. I'm talking about the white powdery stuff that's always hard to swallow. I'll never forget sitting with him in his office, and he would take it first thing in the morning, either with his Diet Coke, or sometimes I'd see him actually swallow it with no liquid at all. And I would say to him, hey, boss, that's really bad for you. You can actually cause yourself, like esophagitis with that, because it scratches the esophagus. And sometimes it gets caught and it doesn't feel good in there. So he goes, come on, now. He goes, I've been doing it like that forever. He goes, what do you know? So I don't know. My father's an ENT, head and neck reconstructive surgeon. I said, I'm telling you, he's an otolaryngologist. I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, at least drink it with your Diet Coke. But
this is a bigger point. And then because I know you're about out of time, but I just want to offer this. I was at the trial. I attended everything that you testified at. It was the first time I got a close-up look at Donald Trump, and it's just not pretty. The guy, besides old, looks really unhealthy. The pallor of his skin, his whole shape, etc. And it's just got to be the case. This would be how a movie maker might conceive of it. This person wakes up, and his hair, his body, his everything is just not ready to be Donald Trump, including aspirin, etc. And there's a whole process that he goes through to make himself look, of a sort of semblance of a healthy leader, and he has to reconstruct it. He's not, in the immortal words of Senator whoever, he's no Jack Kennedy.
Well, there you go. So look, Harry, final question here.
Yeah.
All right. I want to bring it all together because you're great at that. If we bring this all together, the threats of war, the domestic punishment politics, the shadow strikes, and the dodged questions about health and honesty, and how he treats the secrecy the same way with his personal health as he does with foreign policy and so on. Are we still operating under a rule of law, or just the rule of impulse amplified by power and social media?
Okay, it's a tough one, but I certainly think in big chunks of 2025 we were not operating under rule of law. People had speculated, are we in a constitutional crisis? Shit, we were well past it. And the question that I've focused on is it retrievable? Are we, gone over to the other side? But at least insofar as what the White House does now, we had a great opinion from the Supreme Court. Who knows whether the midterms will put some steel in the spine of some Republicans. But yeah, I gotta say, this is not what the rule of law is supposed to look like. And not just there's not accountability, but there's just not roadblocks. There's just not the kinds of checks and balances that are absolutely critical to the whole rule of law as we know it. So there's abridgment after abridgment. Do we get to the point where now literally we can say it's not a rule of law in this country? unclear. People would debate that, but it ain't the rule of law as we know it in the executive branch, and there's certainly no desire there to stay within the boundaries that every president has done, for time immemorial.
Well, Harry Litman, thank you for being my first guest in 2026.
All
Always
right.
appreciate you, and I feel much smarter after this conversation. So I truly appreciate you.
Nice to be out of 2025, and Happy New Year to all you Mea Culpa types. May 2026 really bring us closer to the light.
Amen to that. Thanks, Harry.